Welcome to the 5280 Pitch, Women's Soccer at Altitude. I am your host, Kate Hansen, and today, oh boy, we begin what I promise will be one of the most exciting player profile episodes of this preseason run. The spotlight belongs to a hometown hero, a Colorado-born forward whose journey from Colorado Springs to national spotlight and now full circle back to the beautiful Colorado Rocky Mountains, has captured the hearts of fans everywhere. Ally Watt. If you're tuning in because you heard whispers of first signing ever for Denver Summit FC, you heard right. Ally Watt is that signing. And let me tell you, folks, this isn't just a signing. This is a statement. This is a foundation. This is Denver staking a claim in NWSL with one of its own leading the charge. So let's set the scene before we dive in. Ally Watt currently wears number 11 for the Denver FC. The club announced in August of 2025 that she had been acquired via trade from the Orlando Pride, making her the expansion club's first ever player in history. But that's not all, because the Summit won't officially debut, until 2026. So now that the 2025 season has wrapped up, she is officially a part of the Denver Summit. She had her final lap with the Pride before coming home to the Mile High City. And I want you all to think about what this means. A Colorado girl raised in Colorado Springs, a product of Pine Creek High School, now gets to bring pro-level women's soccer to her home state. It's the kind of story that fans dream about, right? The hometown hero returns narrative we don't often see in sports. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So before she becomes the face of soccer here in Denver, before the Mile High City hears her name chanted in a packed stadium for the very first time, she's already built quite the resume. A resume, honestly, that earns respect. A resume that whispers possibility. So today in this First Whistle series, which is what I'm going to call these series, the First Whistle, we're kicking off with why Ally Watt matters, why her story, why she's not just a name on the roster, but a symbol of hope, ambition, community, the kind that underpins everything that I love about women's soccer. Because the more you learn about where she's been from, like I've said multiple times, Colorado Springs to the W League, from the NWSL draft to a championship, the more you realize Denver Summit didn't just sign a player, they signed a legacy in the making. As a fan, as a broadcaster, as someone who lives and breathes this game here in the Mile High City, seeing Ally Watt's return home feels full circle. It feels like the past and the future are colliding. And if you ask me, I am fired up. Now, I want you to brace yourselves because the next segment we're heading into the locker room. We're peeling back her story, her roots here in Colorado, the sweat, the grind in college, the breakthrough moments, the setbacks, the comebacks. Her journey to this moment isn't a straight line. It is a saga, and I want you to hear all of it. So join me here as we step into this next segment of today's episode because it feels like we're stepping into the heart of the story, the place where the jerseys hang, where the boots are taped, where the pregame rituals unfold, and where players become more than the numbers beside their name. And with Ally Watt, the deeper that you go in her background, the more you realize just how much altitude, ambition, and identity intertwine with her. It is like every chapter of her journey quietly was building toward this exact moment, the day a Colorado kid comes home and becomes the first ever signing of the brand new NWSL club. That doesn't just happen, that builds. So let's start at the beginning, because before the NWSL, before the championship in Orlando, before the W League, even before College Station and the maroon and white of Texas A&M, let's start in the shadow of Pikes Peak in Colorado Springs, where Ally Watt first started sculpting that speed, that drive, that unmistakable attacking personality that made her stand out long before any coach scribbled her name on a scouting report. So if you grew up in Colorado, you know this already. Youth soccer here is different. We are so fortunate. We have a number of Colorado natives on the U.S. women's national team. women's soccer in Colorado is is an entire movement. And I have two little girls. They both play soccer, and I got to tell you, it is different here in Colorado. As you know, we play a mile above sea level where lungs have to do a little bit more. We're sprinting the entire length of the pitch is a slightly different challenge where the wind sometimes does an unpredictable thing to a through ball. As somebody that has grown up in Colorado, I played college softball in Durango, and it's no joke, that wind. The college softball field was at the edge of the mesa, and man, it was just pure wind. And springtime in Colorado is definitely the windy season. And I used to love traveling as an athlete to any city that was not in Colorado because I was like, I can run for miles. We have a competitive advantage here in Colorado because of the weather, because of the altitude. And players who grow up here, especially the fast ones, learn how to use the altitude as an ally instead of an obstacle. It's why so many coaches who watched Allie in those early days kept talking about her raw pace, her relentless engine, and her willingness to take on defenders. Those traits were there before her technique was polished, before the tactical refinement, even before the national attention. You hear that over and over when you talk to anyone who knew Allie in those early years. She was always the one who would test the limits of her own speed. And think about that foundation. A Colorado player growing up around cross-country runners, trail hikers, altitude junkies, Olympians. That mentality cannot help but seep into your DNA. It builds a specific kind of sporting personality, one that doesn't fold at the first sign of fatigue and doesn't blink when the game turns into a sprint-heavy battle. That's a thread you can see running from her youth days straight through her college career at Texas A&M, where she didn't just become one of the best forwards in program history, she became one of the most statistically dominant players in the SEC. Now, Texas A&M is a massive part of the Allie Watts story, and the thing I always remind fans, especially fans that are newer to the NWSL, that college resumes can sometimes get flattened in hindsight. We summarize college resumes into a sentence or two, like led the SEC in goals, points, shots, and assists. And actually, that statement is true for what? The deeper significance of that dominance often gets overlooked because in the college game, leading a Power 5 conference in all four of those major categories is almost unheard of. It's not just volume, it is versatility, it's consistency, and it's pressure. So again, I want to repeat those. She led the SEC in goals, points, shots, and assists. That's insane. So think about what it means to walk onto the pitch, knowing that the opposition is game planning specifically for you and still leading the conference in shots per game, still putting up goals, still creating assists, still turning every metric that matters into proof of impact. That is the sign of a player who doesn't merely show flashes, she sustains danger. At Texas A&M, Allie Watt didn't just perform, she sculpted the identity we now know for her. The trademark acceleration in the final third, the instinct to break lines before defenders even registered the threat, the willingness to shoot, and shoot frequently from angles most forwards don't even attempt. And all those tendencies are reflected in her advanced metrics later in her pro career. The high shot volume, the elite non-penalty expected goals per 90, and ranking in the 98th percentile in NPXG per 90. Those metrics don't come out of nowhere, right? They start in college, where she lived inside that high-octane, chance-creating, fast-break style that A&M is famous for. And here is something that I love pointing out. Some collegiate forwards are stat padding finishers. Their role is singular. They sit in the box. They wait for the final pass to be that last touch. But Watt wasn't that type. At A&M, she was the engine of so many attacking movements. She created space for herself with the ball at her feet. She applied pressure with and without the ball. She drove at defenders instead of waiting for the perfect service. And that mentality right there, that forward who doesn't wait, who initiates, it aligns so beautifully with what Denver Summit FC is building, an identity based on high engagement, aggression, and creating chaos in transition. Now, as she entered the professional ranks, things didn't take a straightforward, linear path. And honestly, that is one of my favorite parts of her story because it makes everything happening now feel even more earned. So, her journey through the NWSL is, in many ways, a tour of some of the league's most distinctive environments. So, North Carolina, the Reign, the Orlando Pride, and each stop helped sharpen a different aspect of her craft. So let's talk about the courage a bit. So North Carolina is or was, depending on which era you're referencing, a team built around intensity, speed, and a press that suffocated opponents. It's a system that demands maximal work rate from its forwards. It's a system where sprinting isn't optional. It is an identity, and players who thrive there almost always emerge with a sharper sense of tactical pressing triggers and more efficient sense of timing in the attacking space. So her time in North Carolina was like a refinement of her natural attributes because what she'd always done intuitively, the courage system demanded that with intention. So then comes the Reign. So Reign is a completely different soccer school, more of a possession-based, more tactical, more emphasis on pattern play and combination sequences. And for a player like Watt, who thrives in direct transition, this experience forced the development of her connective play. It demanded that she learn how to integrate into the buildup rather than primarily at the end of it. And if you watch her minutes with the Reign, you could see these elements sharpening. The one-touch layoffs, the improved timing on diagonal runs, the smarter decisions in the final third. But the chapter where everything really came together, it was in Orlando. So the Orlando Pride were where Allie Watt truly blossomed into a consistent high contribution attacker. And it wasn't just about the goals, although goals matter. Goals help you win games. She logged 48 league matches, scoring 6 goals and 2 assists, and she added cup goals as well. So in playoff matches, she added postseason assists. And crucially, she was part of the 2024 Orlando Pride squad that won both the NWSL Shield and the NWSL Championship. So this is where context matters because winning the NWSL is brutal. There's no easy games. The league is deeply compressed, deeply competitive, deeply physical, and doing it with Orlando, a club historically known more for turbulence than trophies, makes that run even more meaningful because being a part of a roster that shifts the identity of an entire club, that is something that players carry for life. And everything that she did in Orlando builds toward the advanced analytic profile that she's become known for. So her high shot volume, the elite expected goal creation, the constant pressure on backlines, those underlying numbers, those aren't just stats, right? They're descriptions of behavior. They reflect a player who always tests the defense, always gets into meaningful areas, always forces action. And over 3 years in Orlando, that player didn't just refine those instincts. She became the player her teammates expected to stretch defenses, to open channels, and to create chaos. But if we're going to talk about the impact, we also need to talk about mindset because her move to Denver, the Denver Summit FC, isn't just about where she plays. It's about who she becomes while playing here. An expansion club that chooses you as player number 1, the very first signing ever. That is a massive statement. It says this player is the tone setter. This is the player who defines identity. This is someone that we are going to build around. And there's pressure, right? That comes with being the first. Not pressure in the sense of fear, but in responsibility. Responsibility to the locker room, responsibility to the fans, responsibility to the culture you are actively shaping from scratch. And I want you to think about that. Until Allie Watt's name went on that signing release, the club's official roster read 0 players. She wasn't signing on to something that was already built. She was signing on to a blank canvas. That blank canvas, that's powerful, right? It lets a player rewrite their story. It lets them lean into their strengths in the new environment. It lets them step into a leadership way that isn't always possible on a veteran roster that's loaded with established stars. Denver wasn't just giving her a jersey, they were giving her ownership, right? And the moment that she was announced as the first ever Denver Summit FC player, the first press photo, the first quote, the first social media wave, she became the face of something new, right? And that type of symbolism isn't lost on fans. It isn't lost on kids who grew up in Colorado Springs dreaming of something like this. It isn't lost on families who have watched the NWSL grow and always wondered when their state would have a team to support. And if you think that I'm romanticizing this a bit, go back to the coverage around her signing. Every single headline emphasized it. The homecoming, the first player, the Colorado connection. These stories matter. They matter because soccer is a cultural sport, a communal sport. The identity of a club is built not just through wins and losses, but through stories fans can attach their hearts to. And Allie Watt returning home is absolutely one of those stories. Now, there's another layer I want to highlight here because we don't talk about it enough when discussing expansion clubs. Players who return home often become the emotional spine of the fan experience. They are the ones who get recognized in supermarkets, the ones who show up at youth clinics and instantly become the favorites, the ones fans feel a protective kind of pride about. And in the NWSL, where community and supporter culture are so deeply intertwined with the players, those bonds create long-lasting relationships. And you can see already how the community has embraced her because Colorado, we love our own, right? Whether it's soccer, basketball, skiing, or anything in between. I mean, Michaela Schifrin, we Christian McCaffrey. We rally behind our hometown athletes, and our connection to our athletes is personal. So picture this next chapter. Allie Watt walking into the Denver Summit FC locker room, the first player to ever walk into that space as a signed member of the club, the first jersey hung up, the first nameplate, the first boots, the beginning of a culture that will define the next decade of women's soccer in the state. So it's really important to understand how the roots inform the journey, how the journey informs the player, and how the player becomes the standard for a brand new club. And in Allie Watt's case, the journey is rich with meaning. Elite soccer scorer, NWSL champion, high-volume attacker, advanced metrics standout, versatile forward who has adapted to multiple systems, and a Colorado native whose story comes full circle. And before we get into the next part of doing a deep dive here on Allie Watt, we're going to talk about what I expect to see from her as a player with the Summit, some of her advanced metrics. I want you to think about where she is going to be taking us. All these players were signed very intentionally. And I hope that by doing a deep dive into each of these players, you'll walk away with finding that's what this person's going to do. That is what this player is going to bring to our team, the Denver Summit. As we keep diving into the Denver Summit FC building its roster, its culture, its dream, I hope that you fans remember that we're a part of this foundation too. If you're listening right now, you are one of the first. You're at the starting line. You're part of the generation that gets to say, I was there before it all began. And Allie Watt is right there with you, shaping this club step by step. So as we wrap up this week's part 1 of This First Whistle, which again, this is what I'm going to call these player deep dives that we're doing here as we kick things off. I want you to think about why Allie Watt matters, what you would like to see her bring to the Denver Summit, And we're going to get into some of what I think and a little bit more about key statistics and what we can expect from her and what we should be looking for as fans as we watch her in her first season for the Summit. We're going to get into all of that in the next episode. And before we wrap this thing fully, let me leave you with one quick ask, because if you've been hanging out with me here on the 5280 pitch, you're clearly a part of this community that we're building around Denver Summit FC and the women's game in Colorado. So if you've enjoyed today's deep dive, if you've learned something new, if you felt that little spark of excitement about what's coming our way in 2026, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it matters more than you know. Subscribing, make sure that you don't miss any of the player profiles, the tactical breakdowns, the match week recaps, the altitude effect analysis, all of it. It tells the algorithms that women's soccer in Denver deserves to be seen. It helps boost the show. It helps grows our community. It tells future listeners, hey, this is the place where Summit Faithful hang out. So subscribe, follow, share it with a friend who is getting hyped for the NWSL's newest club, and let's keep on climbing together, because this is just the beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks so much for joining me on this week's episode of the 5280 Pitch, Women's Soccer at Altitude.